something tells me that if you're having to work really long hours under stressful conditions, having more people rather than less people, it isn't actually about what you as a person can and can't do, but keeping everybody safe.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
So Lee, you had a question that you wanted to answer, which is something that you said that you've got a cousin who asks you this, and this is another thing that we talked about with Adam, because he gets a similar complaint as a stagehand. And the question was, I like unions in theory, but they're inefficient in practice. Why does it take 6 guys to do the work that one person could do? And so we're talking here about like job descriptions. Like unions are going to have job descriptions. You have to do, it is kind of frowned upon to do work for free in a union environment. Call me crazy, but so Lee, talk to us about that question that you got from your cousin and how you try to respond to him.
Yeah, like I said, I'm from Texas, and even though I'm from a part of Texas that's really historically involved in farm labor, there was like a lot of migrant laborers, and United Farm Workers was really big in South Texas where I grew up. At the same time, like the political conditions in South Texas have shifted such that a lot of folks who are Mexican American have a really specific political agenda. So like a lot of my family is really anti-union as working class people, as electricians, as farmers, and ranchers. And so for my cousin, like we were literally at Thanksgiving, and he's like, I'm a lineman. When the electricity goes out, like we can't wait for one more person to, go up the ladder and open the box and whatever it is. And I think the way that this is not a question I have a fantastic answer to, but what's important about it is like learning together with someone. Like I don't have all the answers, and it would be ridiculous to think that any one organizer does. So that's what I told him. It was like, that's a really good question. And I don't know what your working conditions are like. Like you've known me longer than I've known me. And you know that I'm a nerd, that I read and write for my job. I'm an educator. I don't know what it's like to have to restore electricity after a hurricane. But at the same time, like this feels like something that I've been told in my workplace, which is that like there's a parcelization or segmentation of labor. And like that just doesn't, what it actually means in practice is like, it's not about many different people having one small job, even though that acknowledges that work is a collective effort that takes many people. That parcelization means that job, which is incredibly dangerous, probably needs some safeguards. So I think about like I said, I haven't fully thought this through, so I don't have a catchy line phrase, but like one of the things that I've heard in listening into like the conversation around pilots need more rest between flights because they're doing this really crazy, responsible, heavy job. I don't know what it's like to be an electrician or a lineman, but something tells me that if you're up in the air being fatigued, being having to work really long hours under stressful conditions, having more people rather than less people, it isn't actually about what you as a person can and can't do or more or less equipped to do, but keeping everybody safe. And so that's what my gut said. That's what my intuition said. But oftentimes when you think about like it takes, it's always somebody else's job, or it takes a bunch of people to do the work. It's like, actually, that's probably because for the first time you're working in a safe workplace and everybody there is as rested as they needed and has the ability to like combat fatigue or combat like the challenges that they otherwise face on the job.
Right. Does anybody else have, and Adam, I'll throw it to you if none of the other three have anything else to say, because I know.
I think Graham had some context from the REI position.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is actually so relevant to what's going on at REI right now in our contract negotiations, because we have a lot of different departments that deal with like extremely oversized or heavy equipment like kayaks, canoes, bikes. I myself work in the bike shop department. So my job is like actually pretty dangerous. So just having like a specific example that's relevant to just kind of having multiple people to help with one job. We have to hang bikes on the ceiling in our action sports department. So basically where we sell all of the skis, the bikes, all the stuff that you need to like get outdoors and have a fun time. So we hang bikes on the ceiling, and there is a complete lack of training. Typically, there are only 2 people who actually do this job. So something that we're asking for in our contract is specific training on how to safely put a bike onto the ceiling and have a minimum number of people involved in that task. So just to kind of like, I guess, answer this question, like there is the concern about safety. So of course, having more people involved in a task makes it so that, for example, with the bike, one person is hanging the bike, one person is spotting, and another person is like directing the flow of customers. And then also having the specific training around that task. You know, one person is trained to hang, one person is trained to spot, and one person is trained to direct the flow of traffic. So that everybody is utilizing their own expertise to its fullest potential. So just kind of a cool, relevant example from REI.
And I think the most important thing, you know, there's a lot of things that we could mention and that we could add. And I started off saying that it's kind of frowned upon to do work for free. And that's what you're doing if you do work outside of your job description, right? Is you are doing work for free for the company. And there's no reason to do that because they would not do the same thing for you. But the most important thing is what Graham mentioned, is that they are putting this in their contract. They are talking about this language. They are talking through this. Who is they? The workers there. So if there is genuinely, if there is genuinely just an absurd work rule, guess who can change that? You can. As the worker who bargains your next contract, you can get on the negotiating committee. You can be on the bargaining committee. Run on eliminating this dumb work rule and get on the bargaining committee. Because there's, right, I'm sure there's 300 million people in the United States. There are 100 million plus workers. I'm sure, you know, probably not a whole lot, probably less than people think, but I'm sure there's some that are silly. Well, get rid of it. If it's your contract, if it's your workplace, get rid of it. That's up to you.
Yeah, that was the one point I was just going to throw in there, is that, you know, who's making the decision? When I'm hanging up lights for a concert and we're supposed to do two people per light, if I choose myself to just do it by myself, you know, that's on me. That's my choice. Maybe they are lighter than normal and I can handle that. But that's different than when, you know, if someone in management were to come to us and say, hey, actually, forget about the 2 people per light rule. You're all just going to do it by yourself. You know, that's different. And I think whenever it comes to worker safety versus profitability or, you know, perceived efficiency or saving time, any of that, we should always err on the side of worker safety. And I don't think unions should ever apologize for that.
Yeah, I can add a little bit too, if that's okay. A lot of it's going to piggyback on what Graham said and a little bit on what Adam said. But some of the things we're talking about in our proposals for the first Starbucks contract is a minimum staffing requirement, which really doesn't necessarily exist. Maybe in theory it exists, but if you're, you know, in the middle of a shift and you have 2 people call off, there's nothing right now that protects us in terms of where does that workload then get dispersed. It gets dispersed to the 5 people who are on that shift. And what happens to the profits that are coming in because the company's now not paying 2 employees, but the same amount of profits in theory are coming in. So where is that going? That's going right back to the company. So one of the things aside from a minimum staffing requirement would be the ability to, if we're short staffed, to shut down some channels. I don't know, I'm certain most people are not super familiar with how a Starbucks is run, but there's multiple channels for customers. There's there's the in-house channel. In a lot of cases, there's a drive-through channel. Now there's a mobile order and pay channel. In a lot of cases, there's a delivery channel. All of those require people to run them. And you have a couple people call off and you're still expected to run all of those channels. So we want a couple of things: the ability to be able to shut down certain channels if we're short-staffed, to try to make sure that we're not doubling the workload of the people who were able to be there. And secondly, is compensation for working short-staffed. It's inevitable that our workload is going to, at minimum, probably double if people are unable to be there. And that shouldn't be automatic additional profit for the company. That should somehow be dispersed so that there's that compensation for working harder than you would normally be working is sent back to those people who are working that shift. We're not saying shut the shop down, which is, of course, their narrative. We're not saying if somebody is sick that all of a sudden the entire business has to come to a screeching halt. We're just saying, let's figure out a way together to manage that so that we're not being overworked and the customers are not suffering, and it's crazy the way that these companies look at what we're saying is the most fair and equitable way to handle a situation. And they're going, well, you just don't want us to make any money. You just want to shut everything down. No, absolutely nobody said that. Who wins if we shut the business down? We certainly don't win. So those are some of the proposals we are working on and hopefully asking for and we'll get in that first collective bargaining agreement.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.